Hello, Jacob.
Hello. Hey, hello, John.
Hi, how are you?
I'm great. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you clearly.
Great. Me too. How are you?
Very good. Just doing some catching up on some messages on the computer.
Okay. So you're now, as much as I've seen, you're working in Malta, yeah?
Well, I have a business in Malta. I mean, I'm in Malta now, but I live in a few different places. I move around during the year, but my business is in Malta, and it's an international business.
Okay. Some sort of financial intermediary? Oh.
Well, it's like services. Are you there? Hello?
Oh, hey, hello, John. Somehow
Hi.
the call got, yeah.
Yeah, that's okay. Well, it's we provide some services for investment funds, and some of the activity is in Malta, but it's in some other countries also. It's something new, actually. Some friends in Malta were making this company a year ago, and then they asked me if I wanted to be a partner with them. So
okay, so it includes financial services, right?
Yes. Yeah, I mean, specifically, it's providing independent directors for investment funds. That's what it is.
Okay, I understand. Great. But can we start talking about the Parex case and how you got into it? Because as much as I realize you're from the United States, or am I?
Well, I grew up in the United States. I mean,
Okay.
I have Latvian nationality. My mother was born in Latvia.
Okay. And you were working in several financial institutions in the United States, and then somehow you got into Parex Bank. Am I correct?
Yeah, well, I met somebody from Parex Bank at the American Chamber of Commerce in Latvia in 2002, and I was not looking for a job actually, but he convinced me that Parex was wonderful and that I should work for them. So It's unfortunate. I wish I never met that guy, but anyway, that's how it happened in the beginning.
Okay, and you got to work at the International Relations Department, if I'm correct, yeah?
Yeah, well, the issue was that Parex always had a criminal reputation. In fact, people I knew in Latvia told me all the time that Parex Bank was the mafia and it was a criminal organization and they're involved with corruption and money laundering. This is what everybody was telling me. And but the guy from Parex, who was Vice President Gene Zolotarev, he basically told me that all of this is make-believe and that they are transparent and they are lawful, and that this is all wrong, and also that they needed somebody who was Western, like me, to go to meet Western banks and convince them that Parex Bank was lawful and transparent. So this is why they hired me. They hired me because I'm Western, and then they wanted me
you to have negotiations on correspondence accounts with other banks.
Well, it was partly about that, but it was about other things also. It was about trading lines and borrowing money with the syndicated loan. And then the new thing I was working on at the end was Parex was going to start issuing bonds. I quit just before I left before they did that, but that was my last project, was talking with a lot of banks about how Parex wanted to issue bonds.
It hasn't been since your arrival? Before your arrival?
Well, they did this after I left. So, and actually I was shocked how all of this, I mean, my whistleblowing did not slow down anything. In 2004, I had collected a lot of information about big crimes at Parex, and then I gave the information to a lot of people, and then I thought that this was going to stop them from borrowing. I thought it was going to be impossible that they could borrow more money after all of this information was released. But it seems like nobody wanted to listen, and everybody kept loaning them more and more money afterward. So
because it's really an interesting situation, because I've analyzed most of the information that you've disclosed, and you said that the deal with EBRD was actually discussed between the Prime Minister and the Mr. Kargins and Krasovitsky, the one that owned the bank. So was it true? It was actually a deal that was pre-agreed before?
Well, I mean, I guess you're referring to this new video on YouTube. So
Yeah.
the new video on YouTube says that there were these 4 people were at the meeting to bail out Parex, who were Kargan and Krasovitsky and Gudmanis and Shkele. Now, that is not about the EBRD. That was about, in 2008, the decision to loan a lot of money from the government to Parex. And the source for that, there were some Latvian newspapers a few months ago that were releasing that Shkele had been at that meeting. And this was scandalous because Shkele did not have a government position at that time. Gudmanis was the prime minister, and it's very strange that when Gudmanis had this meeting with Kargan and Krasovitsky, that they also invited...
What did those 2 ex-owners do now? Are they still somehow in the business, or are they just now close their positions officially and unofficially they run the bank, or how is it with those 2 guys?
Well, they still, I guess they still are in Latvia. They still receive money from the Latvian government every month, and this is something that makes me very angry. I mean, the bank was a fraud, and they were never prosecuted, and also the government is paying them something like 50,000 lots per month each. Still. So while everybody else in Latvia is suffering, the government is still giving them money. And it's based, I understand it's based on this outrageous transaction they had at Parex, where they made a loan to themselves, and then they loaned the money back to the bank again, and it was with some huge interest rate. But, and it's not only about that. They're also, I believe they have some lawsuits against the government also. So they're not satisfied with what they already took, and they're trying to sue the government and pressure the government to give them more and more. So it's not finished. No, they didn't just run away with the money. They still are there, and they're trying to get even more money now.
Whoa, that's interesting. Because the Lithuania is facing also the charges from the bank that went broke, the Snoras Bank, if you know it, in 2011. And its previous owners are fled to United Kingdom, and now they are charging Lithuania for 5 billion euros, I guess. It's an enormous sum.
I don't know if you're aware of the link between them and Parex. I mean, this is a side thing, but you should know about it anyway, is that it seems that Kargan planned to go bankrupt already 1 year before. I mean, this is not what he says officially. What he says officially is that the bank was very valuable and the government stole it from him by nationalizing it. But it's clear when you study the situation that the opposite way is true, that he was stealing the assets from the bank. First, he stole the assets from the bank, and then he gave the liabilities of the bank to the government. But one transaction involved the Antonovs, which is that about a year before they did this, giving the liabilities to the government, a couple interesting things happened that I was wondering about.
In 2000, the liabilities were given in 2009, right?
Well, it was about November 2008 was the surprise announcement about the nationalization. And I think it was about 1 year earlier, so about November 2007, is when 2 things happened at Parex that I was wondering about. One thing is that Gene Zolotarev suddenly quit. So
who quit?
Zolotarev. He was very close to Kargan and Krasovitsky, and he's the one who hired me, and he was my supervisor. He's the owner of the Baltic Times, by the way, so he's still involved in Latvia, but he doesn't live in Latvia anymore. But anyway, with Zolotarev, he suddenly quit, and then Parex made this announcement that they were selling their Swiss bank. So a couple years before, they bought a bank in Switzerland called AP Bank, or AP Anlage und Privatbank. And this bank was completely criminal. I know the guy from Parex who was sent to Switzerland to work there, and his name is Valery Hudoroshkov, and he in fact still works for AP Bank today. Nobody has bothered him. He still is there and doing whatever he was doing before. And the product of this AP Bank was to open nominee bank accounts where the banks that held the bank accounts did not know who their customers were. So if you were, let's say, Russian mafia and you wanted to have an account at a bank in the UK, then you would send your money to this AP bank in Switzerland, and AP bank would open up the account at the UK bank, but they would open the UK account in their own name so that the UK bank didn't know who the person was really owned the deposit.
Yeah, you cannot track any source of the money. I know Swiss banks are really famous for that. We have been quite a few of them.
But the full story here, I'm still getting to the connection with Antonov. So when Kargan bought AP Bank, Kargan announced that the purpose of it is that Latvia was entering the European Union, and that a lot of their customers did not want their money to be in the European Union because they were scared about police, basically.
So they were anti-European.
So they wanted to put the money in Switzerland. So he said that a lot of clients had been asking for Parex to recommend banks in Switzerland so they could move their money, move their accounts to Switzerland. And then Kargan had this idea to keep these accounts or keep these customers, that he would buy his own bank in Switzerland, and then they could move their money from Parex accounts to the Swiss bank. I mean, ironically, the Swiss bank then put the money back into European banks. But anyway, the whole purpose of it was money laundering. It was 100% of the purpose of this AP bank was criminal. And then and also some of the most important Parex clients were transferred to this bank. And not only that, is one of the main money launderers at Parex, who was one of the people with the big connections in Moscow, was this Valery Hudoroshkov. He was also sent to Switzerland to to do this activity in Switzerland.
What is the name of the Russian guy? Vladimir
Hudoroshkovs.
Hudoroshkovs.
Valery Hudoroshkovs. Well, I guess he's Latvian. I mean, he's with a Russian name, obviously, but he's from Latvia, and I used to work with him very closely. I know him quite well, and then so 1 year before the government nationalized Parex, Parex announced that it was selling AP Bank to Latvia's Kraibanka, which was the Antonov's bank in Latvia was Latvia's Kraibanka.
He was selling this bank to Kraibanka?
Yes, and it was a very strange news announcement to me because I knew that the purpose of buying this Swiss bank in the first place was to keep these important customers, and then I didn't understand why they would buy the Swiss bank to keep their big customers from Moscow, but then they would transfer the bank to Kraibanka because it's like they're giving away their customers. Yeah. But then there was this period of about 2 years, and actually the nationalization was in the middle of that. There was a period of about 2 years when they were trying to do this transaction of transferring AP Bank from Parex to Kraibanka, and somehow it never happened. But the news never gave any explanation why it didn't happen. I think it might be something about the Swiss regulators maybe didn't allow that. I mean, all these guys are mafia. Kargan is mafia, and Antonov is also mafia. So I don't know why Switzerland lets either of them have a bank there. But the idea is that, first of all, it was very fishy that they were transferring this bank. And second of all, it's like a clue that Kargan was planning to go bankrupt, and he was planning to get certain assets and certain clients out of Parex before he gave Parex to the government. So there was a connection, there was some kind of relationship between Kargan and Antonov's because they tried to transfer this AP bank in Switzerland from Kargan to Antonov's, but they weren't able to do that. And this Antonov's, the older Antonov's, actually was shot during this time also, which makes me wonder if Parex Bank was involved with shooting him, and it also makes me think how these people negotiate. I mean, when Kargan and Antonov's are negotiating with each other, I don't think this is a normal negotiation. I think this is like everybody threatening to kill everybody else. But I would not be surprised when Antonov's was shot if this was something about this transfer of AP Bank.
Okay, that's interesting. And do you know the process of how EBRD came? Because there seems to be one company heavily involved in the deal, and we see that in Lithuania. It's called the Bridge Capital. It is based in Riga. And it was the main negotiator between EBRD and the Lithuanian government to take over the bankrupt bank's assets. But it's the other bank, the bank that went broke this year. It's called Ukio Bank.
Yeah. Well, I think I've heard of a company called Bridge Capital in Riga, although I never heard that they were involved with the Parex transaction or with the EBRD. I think I knew a woman who was at British Chamber of Commerce years ago who was working for Bridge Capital, and I thought they were connected with a different oligarch. I mean, I thought they were connected with Lembergs, but maybe they're connected with all of the oligarchs. I don't know. But I remember I met a woman once at British Chamber of Commerce, and I think she was from Bridge Capital. I'll try to figure out her name later if I can remember her name. And it seems to me at that time, she said that they were some kind of new company doing investment banking deals, and it was mostly about Lembergs, I think is what she told me then. But that would have been in like 2005 that she told me that.
Okay. And does the law organization Law In say something to, because they were the main law advisor, the juridical advisor to EBRD. The same in Latvia, the same in Lithuania. This company.
It's LAWIN.
Yeah.
The company, which I thought had, I guess that the EBRD got a legal opinion from a law firm before they signed this deal to buy Parex stock, and I thought the law firm was Saarinen. But it's possible they were using two law firms.
But you don't know any of some piquant details regarding the Law In company?
I don't know about any connection to Law In company, no. But the only thing that I know about is when I was in exile and getting threats, and I was very angry about this, that I knew Aku Saarinen from Saarinen Law Office. And I remember I sent him a message, and I sent him a message about how, like, can he please help me to talk with anybody, like newspapers or the government, because I've got this serious problem because I, blew the whistle, and now the EBRD is covering it up. And he responded to me that he actually cannot help me because Saarinen gave the legal opinion for the EBRD for the purchase agreement. So I thought it was Saarinen.
Okay.
But by the way, this is through the law firms. Now, what I think would be wonderful that would open up this whole thing would be if anybody who's a journalist could get the purchase agreement, because somewhere is this purchase agreement between the Latvian government and the EBRD, and this document is totally secret, which is outrageous anyway, because it's a government agreement, so it should be taxpayers should be able to see this agreement. But it's not. It's been totally secret. And this leaked document that came later from Nomura referred to the put option, said it was in the purchase agreement. So it should be that in the purchase agreement is where this where this put option is. And there should be some people who have this agreement. For example, people at Saarinen should have the agreement, and people at Nomura should have the agreement. So if you know anybody at Saarinen, or if you know anybody at Nomura, you can ask them unofficially, can they just please secretly give you the agreement?
Interesting, because I've seen the document. It was journalist Lato Lapsa, yeah? Am I correct?
Well, Lapsa is the one who leaked it because it was put on this website, Kargans.com, which was run by Lapsa, although I think it was kind of unofficially run by Lapsa. I don't think he was admitting that it was his. I'm not sure.
Okay. But he's now also in exile, isn't he? Because I've seen that he received also threats and prosecutions.
Well, I think that he was out of Latvia for a few months, but I think he is in Latvia now. And I've had frustration with him and with his organization because what I wanted from them is I wanted, so it was on that website is where this leaked document from Nomura appeared. I made copies of a couple pages of it, the most important pages from it, which are in this YouTube video. And I didn't copy the whole thing. The whole thing was like 56 pages, but I didn't copy everything. And then Kargans.com was taken offline, but there was no public explanation about why it was taken offline. I mean, the only public thing that we knew is that there was this announcement from Chris Gawilliam that Parex or Citadele was suing Lapsa, and then this website got shut down. So I consider this to be censorship because the lawsuit is effectively from the government because William was working for the government when he started this lawsuit. And I think it should have been an issue in the media in Latvia and in Lithuania as well that Latvia censored a news website. I believe that Nomura document is truthful, and therefore I believe it was important news for everybody to read about, but it got censored and is not available anywhere. And I have repeatedly asked Lato, who I've never met before, but I have an email address for him, and also a woman who works with him whose name is Baiba Rule, who works for this. His big website now is piatiek.com or piatiek.lv. But anyway, with this Baiba and Lato, I have repeatedly asked them to please give me the full version of that Nomura document, and also to please tell me where they got it from. And they refuse to give it to me, and they refuse to give any explanation why they won't give it to me. And I've asked two other people, one person who's a journalist in Latvia and another person who personally knows Baiba, to please ask them if they can, since their website is shut down anyway, can they give the full text of this 56-page document? And they absolutely refuse to give it to anybody, and at the same time they refuse to explain why they won't give it to anybody. So I think something sinister is going on. I think they're somehow getting threatened. One way they could be getting threatened would be just through this defamation lawsuit, which I think is still going on, because since the courts are completely corrupt, I would assume that they could get threatened by the government that they're not allowed to give out this document, and if they give it out, then they will get screwed in the court, something like that. So, I think something very sinister is going on there, and I think it would be wonderful if you could find some insider at Piatiek who would give you that document, or maybe they even have this sale agreement also. If you could get the Nomura document, or if you could get the sale agreement, maybe they have it, but they're just scared to give it out. But if you find some employee there, maybe they can just look in the computer and find it and send it to you.
Yeah, we'll definitely look into that. It's really interesting. But do you know who is the main negotiator from the EBRD side? Do they do this in their board in London, or was this locally managed? Because EBRD came here, they say official that they don't come. They are not profit organization. They want to keep stability in the financial sector in post-Soviet countries. But mainly, as much as I've seen, they're purely profit oriented, and the guys who run the business are mainly locally. They're working locally and making deals with governments.
Well, I never met any of the people. What I read in the newspaper, I never met anybody from the EBRD, but what I read in the newspaper is that the person who negotiated on the side of the Latvian government, I believe, was Einars Repše, who at that time was finance minister. He's been in different positions before, but I believe that the negotiation was between the Latvian finance ministry and the EBRD, and I believe Repše is the one who negotiated. Now, Repše is a big crook, and I have plenty of evidence about that, and I keep hearing more things from more people about Repše as well. Repše had me fooled because in the beginning, when I did this whistleblowing, he was famous because he was supposed to be against corruption, and a lot of people in Latvia thought that, it's wonderful that Repše has a political party because he's going to fight against corruption. And therefore, when I did this whistleblowing, he was one of the people who I gave the information to. So he knew that Parex was a fraud at least since 2005. He also knows that I'm in exile and getting threats. He has met me before, but apparently he doesn't give a shit about any of this, which is incredible to me. And when I read that he was trying to sell Parex stock to the EBRD, my original thing was to try to warn the EBRD because I thought they were going to get cheated. I was sending them emails in 2009 when I read that they were going to study Parex Bank, that, listen, Parex is a fraud and don't buy it because your money will be stolen if you buy it, and also don't listen to Mr. Repše because he knows that Parex is a fraud and he's trying to sell it to you anyway. But at that point, what I thought it was is that Repše was the crook and he was lying to the EBRD and trying to cheat them. But then my opinion changed around the other way when I found out there was this put option. So what I think happened is that the people at the EBRD, I guess, are equally corrupt with Repshe, and I think they sat down with each other. I don't know the names of the people at the EBRD, but I think they said that, listen, all of us know that Parex is a fraud, and all of us know that the stock is worthless. However, we want to cover this up to protect a lot of politicians or something like that, or for stability. Actually, the word that the EBRD always uses is stability. And how can we do this? And then they figured out, well, we could like sort of pretend to buy the stock, where we announce that we have bought the stock, but then we make a secret deal that we're going to, trade back the stock the other way after 5 years. So it seems that this is what they have done, and that they're guilty on both sides then. But it was quite funny to me because funny, it's a serious situation, but in the beginning, I thought that Repshe was cheating the EBRD, and I felt sorry for the EBRD. But then later, I figure out that all of them are criminals together, and they worked together to make a fake agreement. Another good source for information in all of this, so it was in the beginning of 2009 is when the EBRD studied the assets of Parex and then decided to buy the shares. At around the same time, Latvia was trying to sell those assets to other companies as well, and the other companies refused to buy the assets and said that the assets are not worth what their book values are, and therefore they refused to buy them. Interestingly, one of the companies that looked at the assets was Krybanka, and Vladimir Antonovs was one of the people who was quoted in the newspaper that Krybanka studied the assets of Parex to see if it wanted to buy the assets of Parex. This is in the beginning of 2009. And Antonovs said in newspaper interviews that they studied the assets and they decided that they were not worth as much as what the government was saying, and therefore they refused to buy them. But I think there were some Western banks that did this as well. So it's funny that a few banks went to look at the assets, and all of them decided that the assets were not valuable. But then the EBRD looks at the assets, the same assets, and says, oh, everything is wonderful, and we're going to buy this.
And they bought it for 50 million lats, yeah?
Well, it was something confusing. It wasn't... It was some kind of transaction where they announced in the beginning that they were going to buy some certain amount of stock, and they also were going to make this subordinated loan. And then what they actually bought turned out to be different from what they said they were going to buy in the beginning. And then there also was some requirement from the government, like the government had to recapitalize, like they were sort of changing the value of the stock at the same time they were doing the purchase because the government was supposed to put in more capital. So exactly what they did, I could study the old annual reports and try to figure it out. But I remember that the announcement in the press was that they were going to invest 106 million euros, and some of it was going to be for purchasing stock from the government, and some of it was going to be a subordinated loan. And then they actually invested a little bit less than that.
Okay. But they bought 25% plus 1, yeah?
I think they bought 22%. That's what they said, that they were going to buy 25% plus 1, but then when they actually did it, they only bought 22%, and I never saw any explanation why.
Maybe they want to play with the numbers because they had the bonus in the leaked Nomura report of 22%.
I think there must be a lot of there's just a lot of secret things going on that nobody knows what they're doing, and I just get the idea that the people at the EBRD are not honest and the people in the Latvian government are not honest, and they're having these secret meetings where they're talking about using, everybody's money, but to do some secret deals where they must have some kinds of accounts that they're shifting around, and who knows what they're doing. But yeah, the official announcement was that they were going to buy 25% plus 1, but then they actually bought 22.
Okay. And what was the amount of non-resident deposits in Parex? Concrete?
Well, I remember in the when I was a Parex employee, we used to have this number. It was not in the annual reports. However, it was in some prospectuses. So we were making prospectuses sometimes for bonds or syndicated loans or for Moody's and Fitch. And the prospectuses usually gave a number about 80% that were non-resident. Now,
and it mainly came from Russia, I guess.
Mainly from Russia. Later on, Parex started making this number smaller. So they started to say that, oh, it wasn't 80%, it was like 75% or 70%. So I noticed that they were making the number smaller. But I have a feeling that it's quite likely that this was fake. Like they just were pretending, they were trying to recategorize some accounts to say that some things were resident, even though they weren't really resident or something like that. That was one thing that was going on. The other thing that was going on is a lot of their resident accounts were criminal in a different way, because a lot of their resident accounts were from municipalities or from corrupt government organizations. Like, for example, one of the biggest depositors at Parex, maybe the biggest depositor, was the city of Riga. The city of Riga has long seemed to be controlled by Kargan. I mean, there have been endless corruption scandals for 20 years where it seems like Parex and Kargan were involved with everything with Riga City. The most recent one or one of the most famous ones is this United States versus Daimler case, where Parex Bank processed bribes to Riga City Council to buy buses, and nobody got prosecuted.
By what?
Buses.
By buses, and it was from a subsidiary company of Daimler, right?
It was from two different companies. It was complicated also because it had intermediaries and different shell companies and everything. But the famous case is called like USA versus Daimler. So if you want to read about it on the website for the United States Department of Justice, then you should look at the Daimler case, and it talks about how the United States got a big settlement from Daimler. But it also mentions that Daimler was not the only manufacturer. The other manufacturer was Solaris, which is from Poland.
Yeah.
So Solaris Bus and Daimler were both selling buses to Riga City, and they were bribing Riga City Council, and there were intermediaries and shell companies and whatnot, and nobody ever got prosecuted. And yeah, Parex Bank was the intermediary. But the impression that you got from this case is that essentially Riga City Council has been working in cooperation with Parex Bank for many years, where all of the things that Riga City Council was doing were somehow done through Parex Bank, where whenever they bought something, for example, it was always negotiated with bribes and kickbacks, and that they would always do the financing with Parex Bank, because Parex Bank was like the trusted partner to divide up the bribes and send them to the offshore companies, this kind of thing. Yeah, but this accounted for a lot of the deposits at Parex. And something that I encounter with criticism, like some people tell me that, oh, it's not fair for me to say that Latvia shouldn't have bailed out Parex because Parex is only offshore Russian accounts, because they say that there was a lot of Latvian money there also, for example, the deposits of city of Riga. But what I say back to that is that the business between Riga and Parex was completely criminal. I'm sure that Riga deposited its money at Parex, but I'm also sure that Riga City Council was getting payments from Kargan for doing this. So this is also criminal business. But yeah, I think by the end, by the time Parex was nationalized, I think it was claiming that about 70% only of the deposits were offshore, but I think it probably was more. And then from the money which was not offshore, I think a lot of it was government corruption, where it was municipalities who were putting money at Parex in exchange for kickbacks.
Okay. That's really interesting. Yeah. How's the EBRD now doing? Because the put option should be exercised.
Well, this is very mysterious as well, and I have no idea how the EBRD, what goes through the heads of these people. I don't know. I mean, I even go back and forth trying to wonder if they're criminals or if they're idiots or what the problem is, or some of them are criminals and some of them are idiots. Some of them, I think, honestly think that they're doing something good, and others of them, I think, realize that they're doing something criminal. But when you think about the accounting for this, it's very hard to understand how they think that they're going to get away with this. Because, okay, so they spent all this money to buy this Parex stock. And the amount, so it's something less than 100 million. But anyway, let's say that it was 50 million euros that they spent for buying this Parex stock. Now, when they spent 50 million euros and they got this stock, the stock was worthless because the liabilities of Parex were much larger than the assets of Parex.
It was almost twice as large as the assets.
Yeah, so the question then is, how does the EBRD account for this? I mean, do they put this Parex stock on their balance sheet and they say that that this stock is worth 50 million euros, even though Parex itself has a negative value? It seems strange for the accounting. And then the other thing which is strange for the accounting is if they reverse this in 2014, which seems to be what's going to happen, like how will they account for that? Because, okay, so suddenly Latvia is going to announce that they're buying the stock back, and if they've been compounding some profit on this for 5 years, I assume that the price that Latvia is supposed to pay to buy it back is probably supposed to be about twice as much as what the original price was. So you have this weird transaction where first the EBRD pays 50 million euros to buy something which is worth zero, and then 5 years later gets back 100 million euros for selling back the same thing, which is still worth zero. So,
but it was split, and the good assets went to Citadele. Is it right?
Well, see, there was something weird about that also, and I mean the company which was Parex Bank. So the company which the EBRD actually bought the stock in is what's called Reverta now, and Reverta is worthless. Reverta.
That's the bad bank,
Yeah, that's the bad bank. So the assets at Reverta have very small values because that money is mostly lost to corruption. But the liability on the balance sheet of Reverta is the bailout loan from the Latvian government. So all of the losses that will be at Reverta will be suffered by the taxpayers because they are the ones who financed Reverta. But Reverta is actually, I mean, the company which is today called Reverta is the company that used to be called Parex Bank. So the stock that the EBRD bought in Parex Bank today should be stock in Reverta.
But so it has stock in Citadele.
Yeah? Now the weird thing that happened is when they made this new company. So the new company. So at some point, Parex Bank transferred the good assets to a new company called Citadele Bank and kept the bad assets. And then after they made this new bank, which was called Citadele Bank, then the government capitalized it. So they used tax money, I think like probably 100 million lots, to capitalize the new company, which was called Citadele Bank. That new company should have been 100% owned by the Latvian government. And the reason it should have been 100% owned by the Latvian government is because the Latvian government put the capital into it. So it had the deposits. I mean, its liabilities were the deposits that used to be at Parex, and its assets were the good assets from Parex, but it started off with no capital. And then the Latvian taxpayers paid to make the capital at Citadele Bank. So it should be that since the taxpayers made the capital, I mean, paid for the capital, it should be 100% owned by the Latvian government. But then the Latvian government suddenly says that they're going to give some of the shares to the EBRD. And I have not, I mean, I guess if I would study the old annual reports, maybe I could figure out more details. Because, of course, it's a crazy transaction to just give something to somebody. Like, how do you account for that? Like, if the Latvian government has stock, which is worth 20 million lots, and then just gives the stock for free to the EBRD, then, you know, what kind of accounting transaction is that? It's like a gift, and then how does the other side account for that also? Like I'm a company, and on my balance sheet, I have a stock which is worth 20 million lots, and I just got it for free, like somebody just gave it to me. How does that make any sense? But
wasn't it in an agreement? Because they originally bought the stock of the unsplit bank. Yeah?
Well, it seems like it could be part of some kind of like secret agreement. And this, there was a lawsuit that started when this happened, because the people who saw that they obviously were cheated were the other minority investors in Parex, which included some investment funds. Like, for example, there's this East Capital fund, which is from Sweden.
Yeah.
And this company, East Capital, which I think is an honest company, and I feel bad that they got cheated from this because I actually met some of them before, and I think they're good people, and they got fake information, and their money got stolen. But anyway, this East Capital company, for example, they bought Parex stock, and then a couple of years later found out that the stock was worthless, and then the government made this new good bank, Citadele Bank, and according to the annual reports, the stock that was owned by East Capital and the stock that was owned by the EBRD was the same. I mean, both of them owned stock, and both of them were minority owners. But then, for some reason, when the government made this new Citadele Bank, it gave some of the stock to the EBRD, but did not give any of the stock to East Capital. And then East Capital is wondering, well, this is not legal. I mean, how can you divide up the bank and then some of the stockholders get the good bank and some of them don't? And it's not only East Capital. I mean, they're the biggest example, but there were other ones also. And there was some kind of lawsuit, which might still be going on. I don't know the update of it, but I understand that East Capital, and you can, of course, call East Capital and ask them about this. There's one of the guys is Lithuanian there, if he's still there, this Ivaris. There's a guy named Ivaris who is there, who is one of the people who I met. But this is something that where there was a lawsuit where East Capital said, no, this is not fair. You can't take a company and spin off a good bank, and then some of the shareholders get shares in the new bank, but some of the shareholders don't get new shares, because the law says you need to treat all the shareholders equally, and therefore this was illegal. So this is my clue that this is another part of some kind of secret agreement between the government and the EBRD, where the EBRD was doing fraudulent things with the government, and then the government wanted to pay them for doing fraudulent things, and I think this is the reason why they got the Citadele Bank stock. But anyway, whether there's still going to be a cash transfer also in 2014, I don't know, but I suspect that the transfer of the Citadele Bank stock was some kind of secret payment for some kind of fraud. Yeah, and all of this should be accounted for somewhere.
Excuse me?
I mean, all of it should be accounted for somewhere. I mean, what would be great is if it was possible to get any information from the EBRD, like ask them on their balance sheet, what is the value that they put on their balance sheet when they bought the Parex Bank stock, and what was the value that they put on their balance sheet when they received this, when you received this Citadele Bank stock, and has the stock which is still attached to Reverta, has it been written off? I mean, have they admitted that Reverta is actually worthless and that they will get no value from that? It would be strange to see the accounting for it, because it can't be honest. I mean, the way the deal works. Yeah.
Because we have maybe the same situation with the bank that went broke in Lithuania in March this year, and EBRD has bought the good assets of it via its controlled other bank.
Mm-hmm.
It was also completely fraudulent because there were many irregularities, especially irregularities with accounting, because they made a loan with money which they didn't have in the first place, that they received government sort of, it was 230 million euros. They received it afterwards and then lent it back to the government. It was completely fraudulent. It was just to make the balance sheet of the received good bank's assets better. So that's why I'm asking, because it's really, as much as I can see in the media, it doesn't cover the situation here in Lithuania as well. So in Latvia, as much as I've read your opinions, the mainstream media was silent. But, yeah.
Well, this is another thing that is frustrating to me through this whole thing. Okay, the EBRD is taxpayers are paying for the EBRD, and the EBRD is supposed to be against corruption and against organized crime and all of this. People who I talk to in Latvia, they all the time tell me that they're afraid they're going to get killed, and they're telling me that I'm going to get killed, and everybody needs to be quiet about what the EBRD is doing. And I'm wondering, what the hell is everybody talking about? I mean, the EBRD is a public organization which is supposed to be making Eastern Europe better, and nobody will talk about them because everybody's afraid they're going to get killed. And I hear this.
I saw in your one of the videos, I guess the first one of yours, and I managed to get the original articles from Wall Street Journal and Financial Times, where in Russia there was a huge corruption scandal, and the head of Russia's EBRD was fined went to court.
Yeah, about that one, I actually, at the time that came out, I thought that was maybe something about Parex, but I think now that it was actually about something else, and I think that was not about Parex. I mean, unfortunately, it's very hard for me to get any information from the EBRD. They absolutely refuse to talk to me, which is another totally ridiculous thing. I mean, I don't know what it will take for them to talk with me. I mean, I seriously wonder if I need to put a billboard in front of their office in London, like, I am a whistleblower, please talk to me, or like pay people to have a demonstration in front of the office in London. On their website, if you look at their website, it really seems like, they are against corruption and they have this big compliance department and they love whistleblowers, and here is how, if you are a whistleblower, you can contact them. But quite seriously, it is impossible for me to talk to anybody there. I seriously think that they must have, inside the EBRD, sent some message around, like, listen, nobody is allowed to talk to John Christmas. We have to pretend that we don't know anything about him and we never heard any information from him. I mean, even just to acknowledge receiving information from me. Like, if they're, well, I mean, you see my point, is that it's ridiculous that this government organization has written all over their website about how they love whistleblowers. And I have been, since 2009, I have been trying to contact them, and they absolutely will not acknowledge that I exist. They're pretending like there is no whistleblower. They ignore all of my emails. I think I've sent 4 registered letters, and they have completely ignored all of them. And really, with these videos, I mean, there's 3 videos on YouTube now. They have over 100,000 views, including a lot of people inside the EBRD. But at the same time, I really think if you could find somebody honest inside the EBRD who would leak information to you, I strongly think that they must have warned people inside the EBRD that they are not allowed to talk with anybody about John Christmas, and they're not allowed to talk with anybody about Parex. And I've gotten this also from some journalists. So a couple of the pieces of evidence I have, which I'm happy to send to you. One thing which appears in the video is this email where there was a journalist who called somebody at the EBRD who admitted that they are using put options. So I can send you the original email from that. I don't know the name of the EBRD employee who said that, but what's interesting is that after I put that into a video, later on, journalists who called the EBRD was saying, like, we cannot talk at all. Like, this is completely secret and we cannot talk about it. So I seriously think that inside the EBRD, they must have sent some email to everybody saying that nobody is allowed to talk about this, that this is 100% secret.
Usually those institutions have a persona non grata list, so I guess you made it.
Yeah, well, but anyway, and another one which was quite ridiculous is, then there's this Italian newspaper, which is called Il Manifesto. It's actually a communist newspaper. And there's this Italian journalist named Mauro. And Mauro, I mean, he's a freelance journalist. He sells articles to different newspapers. He's not only with Il Manifesto. But anyway, Il Manifesto published this article, and they are a major newspaper. They have a lot of people read that newspaper. And the article basically accused the EBRD of being criminal. And you would think that maybe the EBRD would respond to this. I mean, if they're not criminals, then why don't they make a response and defend themselves and say that they're not criminals? Or why don't they sue Il Manifesto for publishing this if it's not true? But they absolutely refuse to talk to Il Manifesto, and they refuse to talk to Mauro. And Mauro says that he's contacted them twice. Actually, he says that he has a new thing that he wants to put in Il Manifesto this month, which is still about the EBRD. And he says they absolutely refuse to talk to him. So here he's publishing articles in a major newspaper about crimes at the EBRD, and the EBRD, if they were innocent, then why don't they just tell him that they're innocent? But instead what they're saying is he calls them and they say that we can't talk about this and this is secret. So again, this is unacceptable to me. I mean, the EBRD is paid by the taxpayers, and they're doing all these secret things and they're not telling anybody what they're doing.
So this project is called Il Manifesto, yeah?
Well, the guy's name is Mauro Catarina.
Yeah.
His name is in my video.
Yeah, okay. I'll look into it.
Yeah, you should send him a message. He has a Facebook profile. On Facebook, you can find him and you can send him a message, and then I guess what you could do is you could ask him to confirm. Actually, here I'll tell you what I can do is that I can forward 2 emails to you, and one email will be from Mauro, and it will be an email where he wrote that the EBRD is refusing to talk to him, and then the other email will be from this other journalist, and his name is Graham. And it will be about how Graham called them, and they said that they are using put options. And then the other source of information I had in all of this is from just a friend who's American, and he's a lawyer, and he has a business in Latvia, and for his own company, he was talking with the EBRD sometimes. But he, a couple times, asked them what the hell is going on with Parex Bank, because he knew about my story, and he knew that the EBRD was doing that. And he had 2 times when on Skype he sent me something interesting. One time on Skype he wrote to me that he was talking with an EBRD lawyer. I think it was not an EBRD employee, but rather it was an independent lawyer who was working for the EBRD. And that guy said that the EBRD, it was essentially, I was asking, why don't they listen to me when they're doing their due diligence on Parex when they were studying to buy Parex? And the response from this lawyer was, it was essentially because they already knew that Parex was criminal. He used the word shady. He didn't use the word criminal, but it was that they already know that Parex is shady. So I'm wondering, gee, well, what's the point of me being a whistleblower if they already know that their company that they invested in is criminal? And what's the point of them even doing due diligence? Because they said that they're doing due diligence, but what's the point of that anyway? I mean, I think if you do due diligence, it's supposed to be to make sure that the company is not criminal. But if they already know that the company is criminal, then this is just fake due diligence, and they're announcing that they're doing something which they're not really doing. That was one thing, and then a couple years later, the same guy, the same lawyer, said that he again talked with somebody else who also was a lawyer for the EBRD, and that guy said that the EBRD is always using put options for all of its deals, which essentially means that, which means that everything they are doing is criminal. And then I started to kind of learn more about what the EBRD was doing in history, and I understand in history that a lot of the deals that they did in Russia were suspected like they were criminal deals. I mean, the biggest, worst one that I read about is how they were providing money to Stolichnaya Bank, which the reputation was that it was a violent criminal organization. So whatever they were doing with Stolichnaya Bank was clearly illegal. But one of the best quotes, which, I mean, a quote which I wish I could find the book and look it up, but are you familiar with Edward Lucas?
Edward, yeah, he's in Lithuania.
So Edward Lucas has written 2 books, and in one of his books, he has a paragraph about the EBRD, where he mentions that the reputation for the EBRD in Russia, and I believe he's talking about the 1990s, that the reputation for the EBRD in Russia in the 1990s is that they would go to some criminal banks that were with Kremlin connections, and also banks that were money laundering banks that had reputations like everybody believed that these banks were criminal. And then the EBRD would make an investment in the bank, like buy 20% of the stock, and then the bank would use this investment like a marketing tool, because what they would tell everybody after that is, listen, we are completely clean and completely lawful, and the evidence that we are lawful is that the EBRD owns 20% of our stock, but the banks were completely criminal. Well, yeah, like, for example, to borrow money from the West. I mean, I think that a lot of Western people, well, I know this. I used to be a Parex relationship person for Western banks, and Western banks love stuff like this, because if a Western bank sees a Russian bank that's just owned by some Russian guys, then they think, oh, this is probably a criminal bank. But if a Western bank sees a Russian or a Latvian or a Lithuanian bank, which is 20% owned by the EBRD, then they think, oh, well, this must be lawful, this must be respectable, because the EBRD, is a government development bank, and therefore, how is it possible that they could own a criminal bank? But they do anyway. I mean, these banks were criminal, and then the EBRD bought 20%, and these banks still were criminal. So I asked Edward once if he could please tell me the names of the banks that he was referring to when he wrote this in his book, and he refused to tell me the names of those banks. But I believe one of them is Stolichnaya Bank, and then I understand there were others also. So if you looked through the history of the EBRD making investments in banks, I think you would find a bunch of criminal banks in Russia where they did the same thing, where they bought 20% of a criminal bank.
Yeah, and they get put options, right? They get some kickbacks, large kickbacks.
Well, I guess, I mean, in the case of Latvia, it seems like the kickback is supposed to come from the government. So I don't know if it was done the same way with Russia, if there was like some secret deal with the government. But, I mean, with Latvia, the only way they can, okay, so they bought this worthless stock for 50 million euros. The only way which they can get some benefit from that is they're not going to get that money out of Reverta. So they must get that money from somewhere else. So I guess they're expecting that the Latvian taxpayers will need to pay them back all the money that they think they're going to get. So in Russia also, I don't know how they did this, but I mean, yeah, I mean, it seems like it's some kind of criminal thing where they're making secret deals with people in the government.
That's really interesting. Yeah, now also try to understand why did it buy two banks here in Lithuania which were completely broke and known to be criminal 10 years ago.
Well, yeah, I've heard about, everybody has always told me that those banks were criminal, because when I used to work in Latvia, 10 years ago, everybody already 10 years ago knew that those banks were criminal. Sonoras also, I mean, all three of them, that Šiauliai and Ukio and Sonoras, everybody has been saying for 10 years that all of those banks are criminal.
Yeah, they were. 80% of his assets were completely, could be written off. Because what those banks were doing, for example, Ukio Bank, it was increasing the value of its assets and lending again on the bigger value, because the people who are doing the valuation were friends of the management of the bank, so they were using the depositors' money to give loans to the owner's company, overpriced assets, 10 or sometimes even 15 times than the real market value of the assets. So that now that you told me the situation in Russia, it might be that the EBRD is just a marketing tool and it has no interest in increasing the value of the bank whatsoever. It's purely marketing sham with lots of kickbacks and.
However, I do think, I mean, my opinion is that if there's 1,500 people working at the EBRD, I just cannot imagine that all of them are criminals. I mean, I think it must be that there's some people at the top who are corrupt and dishonest, and then I think there must be some people who are just not very smart, who are the employees there, and then their boss tells them to do something, like, listen, you need to do this. And then they say, oh, but that's illegal. And then their boss says, listen, you need to do this for stability. And then they say, oh, okay, if it's for stability, then I will do this. But that's this word they throw around. But really, I think it must be possible for you or for me someday. I mean, I still hope myself that I will someday find somebody from inside the EBRD. In fact, I've even wondered sometimes if I shouldn't apply for a job myself there, because I'm so curious what the hell they're doing that maybe I should try to get employed there. And then if I'm an employee, maybe I can try to figure out what all these criminal things were that they were doing. But from 1,500 people, there must be somebody who is not a criminal there. And if you can find somebody who is working there and ask them, like, can they please give you this agreement so you can see what the Ukio agreement was, or what the Parex agreement was, or what the Stolichnaya Bank agreement was. I mean, there must be somebody in there there must be some people there who actually hate corruption themselves and who would want to expose this.
Yeah, look into it, because I have several interviews, secret interviews with major people from Central Bank, and we get a lot of peek on details, and I assume we are getting